Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Cameron Schulte, the Director of Government Relations at the Heartland Institute.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome back. Today is Saturday, I believe. Time's going very fast. I'm hoping you're enjoying and learning a lot at our ICCC. I think this is our 15th year of doing it. But this morning, I want to welcome up a gentleman from the state of Utah who has been an absolute leader on ESG issues. Treasurer Marlo Oaks of Utah has spent a 17-year career in finance, and he actually began his career working the derivatives desk at Standard Chartered Bank in Hong Kong. And as he and I were joking before, Hong Kong is a long way from Utah, and Utah seems a much, much better place to raise a family. But because of that career, it gives him particular insight into ESG and the world of finance and the insidious nature of the issue. He, along with Treasurer Riley Moore in West Virginia, have been national, if not global, leaders on the pushback on ESG. In Utah alone, Treasurer Oaks divested $100 million of their state's funds from BlackRock. And as I do the math in my head, $100 million is $100 million more than I have. So with that, please welcome to the stage Utah State Treasurer Marlo Oaks.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I assume, oh, there we go. That's my office there at the very top. Let's see, is this the clicker here? It is. Okay, how does this work? Okay, there we go. Ah, there we go. Okay. So, ESG, I believe, is an American issue. This is not about red and blue. This is about right and wrong, about freedom, about globalism, about how do we solve our differences and preserving our markets and the constitutional form of government. I apologize, there's a lot of words on some of these slides, but what I try to avoid in my conversations with people are the underlying politics of ESG and really focus on the mechanism, the system itself, and what it does to our society. And that's critical to understand. So if you think about business and politics, business has always been involved in politics. In the past, we've had businesses that have contributed to campaigns, backed different candidates, or given to both sides of the aisle, for example, because they want to have influence. And then they've also have lobbyists and things of that nature. What's different with ESG is that ESG uses business to drive politics. So businesses are adopting political issues themselves and driving those issues through our markets and through society. And that's why this is so insidious. One of the behaviors that we see are debanking people because of the wrong ideology. This is just one example of how this plays out in the marketplace. So what is ESG? It stands for Environmental, Social, and Governance, and it attempts to address societal issues through finance. And really, I view it as an investment system that measures compliance to a political agenda. We have experts telling us what goals we are going to have in society, and then companies are rated based on those factors that a rating system determines. And then compliance is rewarded or punished through the capital markets. Now, we all know it's political, but the example that I give is Tesla being kicked out of the S&P 500 ESG index. How much more political does it need to be, right? I mean, this is the poster child for what an ESG company supposedly would look like. And yet they are being tossed out of the very index and replaced with ExxonMobil. That makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, come on. So Think about traditional values-based investment strategies. So socially responsible investing is the strategy that we've all have known traditionally, and that is, as particularly religious institutions, we have certain values as religious investors that they would want to avoid businesses or industries that didn't line up with those values, and so they would avoid, for example, tobacco, firearms, gambling, things like that. Those are very traditional, socially responsible screens. Importantly, it was about personal choice, and as a socially responsible investor, I would respect other people to have different views than my own. And so that respects the marketplace, and it respects other people's other investors to have different views from my own. But ESG is a coercive values-based strategy. It really masquerades as a values-based strategy, and it uses power to enforce what the ESG items are. And so it represents centralized power. It also utilizes other people's money without them knowing it, and it's outcomes-based. Now, this outcomes-based issue is important. I'll talk about in just a minute. But when you think about moral relativism relative to the marketplace, when truth becomes relative, you can't define reality. When you're seeking an outcome like ESG does, you shut down debate. You have to shut down debate in order to drive that agenda. And by doing that, you're not interested in seeking for truth. And when you have that happen, there is a void, and power steps into that void. There's a void of truth. And so that when power steps in, it can define reality when reason no longer exists. And that's what we're seeing in the United States today. We're seeing a void. We're seeing the people being shut down because of having the wrong viewpoint. And as a result, power stepping in and saying, this is the only way we can go. And when ESG, in ESG, again, it's seeking an outcome. There's no debate on the climate crisis, right? I saw the slide, 97% of science, right, agrees. That's ridiculous. But it's an attempt to shut down debate about the climate and about social injustices. And so in order to drive that agenda, we have to commit the marketplace to this agenda. And so we have to go after the most powerful parts of the market, and that is the financial services sector, because the financial services sector allocates capital in the marketplace. Capital is how businesses survive. It's like oxygen for all of us, right? And so markets depend on information and the diversity of thought. When you shut that down, you no longer have a marketplace. So think about traditional capitalism. We as individuals are sovereign. It is us that are at the center of capitalism. We make choices on how we're going to spend our money. Adam Smith said the interests of society. Adam Smith is the father of economics, by the way, 1776 time frame. Said the interests of a society are best served when all of us as individuals are pursuing our own interests. Barack Obama said it is important to remember that capitalism has been the greatest driver of prosperity and opportunity the world has ever seen. But ESG cannot succeed in capitalism. This is from the United Nations, June 2004. This is the first publication that I saw that actually used the words environmental, social, and governance. Only if all actors contribute to the integration of ESG can we make progress. When we do that, you no longer have markets. Now, what they did is this is from the June 2004 publication, Who Cares Wins. They had asset managers. They invited asset managers, actually mostly banks. The two United States institutions that were at this were one of the endorsing institutions, Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley. The UN was very strategic in putting this group together, knowing that money is power. So, if you think about the recipe for tyranny, we have identified goals to achieve, and we have to have goals that all of society needs to achieve. We generate a crisis or an emergency to create fear and silence dissent, and then we look for ways to enforce compliance. Now, one of the things that we're trying to do around the world is implement digital IDs, vaccine passports, and central bank digital currencies. Why? Well, that's a great way to control everybody. And we turn into a World War II style check papers society. Speaking of World War II, Mr. Hitler, he could not handle argument or criticism. And he needed a safe space. Maybe he grew up in a safe space in Austria, I don't know. But anyone who questioned his assumptions or facts, that rattled him. And he said to the Hitler Youth, the party system, freedom of discussion, and freedom of the press sapped the unity of the nation. Actually, this is what he told the Hitler Youth. We have to learn our lesson. One will must dominate us. We must form a single unity. One discipline must weld us together. One obedience, one subordination must fill us all. And that is a recipe for tyranny. We have one goal. We have to unify around these goals and move in that direction. I call it outcomes-based governance. So some examples: no child left behind. 100% of children will pass their exams and be proficient. The United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, another example. These are laudable goals, laudable outcomes that we want to achieve. Eliminate poverty, stop hunger, prevent a climate crisis. ESG, same kind of thing. We have outcomes-based goals at the heart of those. Well, what about rules of conduct? If we think about rules of conduct versus outcomes-based governance, one of my favorite economists, Friedrich Hayek, said the possibility of men living together in peace without having to agree on common concrete aims and bound only by abstract rules of conduct was perhaps the greatest discovery mankind ever made. A system of common concrete ends towards which all efforts are directed by authority would deprive us of the advantages of a free civilization. And you think about rules of conduct, that's our Constitution, the 10 Commandments, as opposed to what the UN and ESG is trying to do. Now, this is one of the most important parts of this presentation. Where did the Sustainable Development Goals come from? This is from May of 2020. Beijing takeover of United Nations presents existential threat to the US. The Chinese Communist Party was integral in creating the Sustainable Development Goals. The Sustainable Development Goals are closely related to ESG, which should tell us all we need to know about this system. And this is ESG in one image. It looks like capitalism, but it tastes like tyranny. So some examples of ESG and centralized control. Over on the right, this is my favorite, the World Economic Forum, our favorite group here. How we will make Sri Lanka rich by 2025. Yeah, thank you. That was in 2018. And of course, last year, their president had to escape the country for fear of his life because of food shortages resulting from going to organic fertilizer because they were trying to keep their ESG rating, the highest in the world. They had a 98 out of 100 score. Sri Lanka had the highest ESG rating in the world. And closer to home, we've heard recently about the U.S. wanting to ban gas stoves. Now, a year ago, actually, on the left there, the World Economic Forum proclaimed that gas stoves are a bigger climate threat than previously thought. Whoa. You know, climate in my home is constantly changing because of that gas stove, I swear. But then down at the bottom, we have what happened in Colorado, people with smart thermostats, right? You couldn't turn your thermostat below 80 during a heat wave. That's not very fun. So back to financial markets. In order for a financial market to work, I talked about requiring a diversity of thought and different views about the future. So if you think about it in the stock market, one investor thinks climate change is not a problem, that oil and gas is a critical part of our economy. Another one may say, well, I've held ExxonMobil for a long time, but I believe that climate is a problem, so I'm going to sell my shares. That's how markets work. You have to have different views. Now, our largest investment managers are the index managers, our passive managers such as BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. They own the market. These largest investors are not divesting like a traditional socially responsible investor would. They're actually holding the marketplace as passive investors, but what they're doing is they're going in and engaging with companies and changing them. And this is the problem. Now, I will say, from a proxy voting perspective, so proxy vote allows an investor, if I own shares of a company, they have an annual meeting, I have the ability to vote my shares in that annual meeting, and that's in fact, this is where the real battle is happening today, is in these annual meetings with the proxy vote, because policies are being pushed onto the companies through proxy proposals, shareholder proposals, and so of those three entities, Vanguard's proxy voting is actually the best. I reviewed that just about a month and a half ago, 2 months ago. I was surprised. They voted how I would expect a traditional fiduciary would vote their shares, and that was voting against ESG types of proposals, unlike BlackRock and State Street. So I want to point that out because I was very pleased to see Vanguard doing that. So this is a quote from Megan Muldoon, who is the global head of ESG integration at BlackRock. And she noted that they only have $400 billion of sustainable investments, which we say only, $400 billion, that's a lot of money. But when you have $8 trillion or $9 trillion, that's only 4.4% of your assets. Now, you would think that would be, the $400 billion would be the only amount of ESG that they would push in the marketplace. But it turns out that they have said, BlackRock has said, well, ESG risk and climate risk are investment risk, and therefore we can use all of the assets in our portfolios, no matter whether it's an ESG mandate or not, to push ESG. Now, this is one of the most significant problems that we have. Because they are defining ESG risk as investment risk, they have now justified using your assets and my assets to drive a political agenda. Now, why are they doing that? Because the only way that you can be successful if you have goals is to force the marketplace to converge and adopt those same goals, the same political agenda. And that's where these commitments, where these big asset managers have committed to climate risk and the net zero climate initiatives, right? When they have committed to those, they have then determined that they have to push that in, they have to adopt that kind of policy in their investments. So this is a little bit of more information on how engagement happens. So ExxonMobil in 2021, BlackRock goes into ExxonMobil and says, you need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions as an oil company, thank you. And you need to create a plan to be net zero by 2050, and you also need to cut oil production by 20%. Now that was great timing, right? Right before oil prices skyrocket, you're cutting oil production by 20%. Now, the only way you do that, if you're an ExxonMobil, is you sell assets. And the only entities that are large enough to pick up those assets are typically state-owned enterprises, like PetroChina. So we have a company in the United States that is being pushed by BlackRock to divest. And BlackRock, on the other side, they own about 6.6% of ExxonMobil, and they own about the same amount of PetroChina. So we are literally have entities undermining our American national security and bolstering China with this, with their engagement with companies. The 2060 engagements, that was the total number of engagements that BlackRock had in 2022 with companies. So now the enforcement mechanism is they will go in and with their proxy vote, they will not support a member of the board if they have not shown sufficient commitment to the climate agenda or whatever other agenda that is being pushed. And so last year they said we did not support the election of 176 directors for climate-related concerns. Now this obviously impacts the market and other investors. If I'm an investor in ExxonMobil, my investment thesis likely revolves around the fact that oil and gas are important parts of the economy, and therefore I want exposure to that in the marketplace. I'm not expecting somebody else in the market like a BlackRock to go in and try and cut oil production by 20% with the company that I'm invested in. That impacts me and every other investor who doesn't agree with that agenda. Now, the other part of this is that when we shut down alternative viewpoints, we destroy innovation. This is one of my favorite marketing campaigns, which I think this is illegal in the United States now. Think different. So, I mean, it was nice while it lasted. So if you think about capitalism in the United States, we talked about economic freedom and the individual being at the center of that, as opposed to what we call stakeholder capitalism, which is ESG essentially. And the idea is that experts are going to run society. The United Nations, World Economic Forum, the European Union, these are all our experts, and they do a wonderful job. And United States competition, innovation, stakeholder capitalism is all about compliance and conformity. One of my favorite quotes that Mr. Madison, crisis is the rallying cry of the tyrant. And wasn't he proficient or prophetic? Okay, so if you guys aren't depressed yet, let's go into this. America's and Mao's Cultural Revolution. So I'm going to tie some of these things together here. America and Mao's Cultural Revolution. So this was a presentation, and I've added to it, a lady by the name of Lily Tang Williams, who went through Mao's Cultural Revolution as a child. She looked at 12 things that happened in Mao's Cultural Revolution that have all happened in the United States over the last 2.5, 3 years. First thing is in China, the purging of political enemies and silencing dissidents. And you can see there, here in America, silencing and canceling dissenting voices. Now, what's interesting, shareholder proposals. So the shareholder proposal, this was in 2021, there's a proposal regarding lobbying reporting. So the note by the shareholder advisory group was that increased disclosure would help shareholders to more fully assess risks presented by the company's indirect lobbying. Now, As You Sow is a major coalition of leftist shareholders, and they admitted that lobbying and political contributions that ultimately fund candidates or groups backing abortion restrictions do implicate companies. And so what they do with that information is then put pressure on companies that show that they have the wrong lobbying money, lobbying money going to the wrong sources. They then pressure them to stop supporting the wrong causes. And so that's one form of this playing through our markets. In China, canceling the four olds, including traditional ideas, cultures, habits, and customs. And of course, we have the attacking of founding fathers, our traditional values, institutions, denigrating free markets, highlighting capital's inequalities or inequities and greed, selfishness, things like that. And of course, going after the founding fathers. In China, we have this arbitrary division by critical class theory, the oppressors and the oppressed. There were 5 black classes and 5 red classes. And here we're seeing this oppressors and oppressed with critical race theory, diversity, equity, inclusion. I'll talk about that in a little bit. Shareholder proposals here regarding human rights and civil rights expertise on a board. Wow, that's important, don't you think? We have got to have civil rights and human rights expertise on corporate boards so that we can maximize shareholder value. Maybe not, maybe not. Maybe that's not a great idea. Indoctrinating children. So in China, you have the Red Guard. Here, this is the National Education Association back in 2021. The nation's largest teachers union voted to approve a plan to promote critical race theory in all 50 states. What does that do? You're creating social justice warriors with your children. Toppling down statues, burning buildings, looting private property, changing the names of schools and streets and closing churches. This is a picture of the Catholic Church in China that came under attack in the Cultural Revolution. Now, this is one of the most important things to understand, CRT and diversity, equity, inclusion. So in China, they had public shaming, self-criticizing, struggle sessions, loyalty tests, apologizing, public apologies. Critical race theory is a similar kind of effort about self-criticism. You have anti-racism as part of that. So this is a very famous picture of what they like to claim as diversity, equity, and inclusion. You see the little guy that can't see over the fence, and equity, we're going to help this person to see over the fence. The problem is that equity is about groups and not individuals, but even more than that, if you think about equity, we're going to actually tear down, right? We're tearing down, not lifting up. So this is how equity really happens. And you see it with the National Merit Scholars, right? That the school said we can't give out the National Merit Scholarships because other people are going to feel bad. So we've got to lower our standards. And this is capitalism. Now, capitalism has one of its problems apparently is inequality, but when inequality means that everyone's better off and all boats are higher, that's not such a bad system, as even Mr. Obama admitted back in 2016. Being guilty by birth and by relation, by association, by class, past words and deeds, that's in China, very similar here in the United States, codifying racism and sexism in corporate practices. So having anti-racism classes in companies and teaching people how to be less white. I think that was Coca-Cola had that training back in 2021 or 2020, something like that. This is Wells Fargo giving this headline here from the Washington Free Beacon, how business giants get lower interest rates for meeting diversity quotas. So BlackRock said, we want a line of credit that will be lower if we meet our diversity quota hiring practices. So this is an incentive for having implemented DEI. Now, why is BlackRock doing this to themselves? Because they know that if they do it, then they can point to themselves and say, hey, we did it, you can do it too. This is another group called Be Certified, using the power of business to do good. And they have an anti-racism stance. This is actually from a company in Utah that I came across. I'm like, oh my goodness, what are we doing? Family and neighbors turn on each other for COVID violations, different political views. China, same thing happened. You think about redefining social norms, the 10th thing there, promoting unisex, genderless society. So the picture there is of women in China, and you can see that their hair is cut so that they look more like men. And you're really trying to create social chaos. And of course, here in the United States, we have the multi-gender LGBTQ plus agenda. We're redefining what a fiduciary is, and talking about ESG risk and climate risk equaling investment risk, and promoting stakeholder capitalism. The press. Wow. Press and media being controlled by the CCP and used for state interests and propaganda. This was a shareholder proposal in 2021 at Facebook, a proposal regarding reducing false and divisive information. Anytime we talk about attacking disinformation or misinformation, that should be a clue that those people who are attacking misinformation and disinformation are actually for silencing alternative viewpoints. This is my favorite quote. I came across this last March at the Jefferson Memorial in Washington, D.C., down below. There's some exhibits, and I came across this quote. Here, meaning the University of Virginia, we are not afraid to follow truth wherever it may lead, nor to tolerate any error, so long as reason is left free to combat it. We have got to protect free speech in this country, because that's the only way that we come to some semblance of the truth. And that is one of the secrets to our success as a country, is the ability to take a plurality of ideas and come up with better outcomes than centralized control. And finally, in Mao's Cultural Revolution, they used mob tactics of fear, intimidation, and violence. And of course, we saw the mob tactics with BLM and Antifa. But in the boardrooms today, it's really stakeholder or shareholder activism that really act like these mobs, intimidating companies and creating pressure on them to adopt policies that they otherwise would not adopt, that aren't in the interest of shareholders, certainly. I guess that's the end. Is that it? Okay. How are we doing on time? I don't even know. Can I take questions? Okay. Yeah. Questions?
Yeah, if you have a question, please put your hand up and a microphone will come find you, and we will start over here. Please stand and identify yourself.
By the way, if you have an alternative viewpoint, you're going to be silenced.
Hey. What are you doing in 2024? Are you going to be busy?
Actually, I was very pleased to see Vivek Ramaswamy enter the race. So.
Karthik Krishna, Krish Energy from Colorado. So if I look at this conversation about basically the climate lunacy, so to speak, I see that our media is being censored, privacy is an issue, our funding is locked up by some communistic ideas. And I want to go back, like when Putin actually gave a declaration saying he wants Russia to be a cultural leader, meaning parent 1 and parent 2 is unacceptable to us. We want something in a middle ground that actually understands our faith and religion as well. And I say this, I live in Colorado, I work with the Space Foundation. We have existing ties with the Russian space industry. Is it too far-fetched for us to work together on expose the climate nonsense that's going on right now?
No, I don't think so. No, absolutely not. I think anytime we can, I'm trying to work with Democrats to help them understand the dangers of ESG as a mechanism itself, right? I think we have to come together with people across the world who are concerned and help them recognize what's happening in the world to get to better outcomes and to overcome what is essentially becoming tyranny. So, thank you.
Go ahead, sir.
Hi, thanks for your presentation. I understand a lot of red state have divested themselves of BlackRock, a lot of, pension funds and things like that. I'm from the great state of Texas. I think we're one of them. What is your take on the trajectory of this? We know that BlackRock lost a lot of money recently, some believe because of the exposure of their commitment to this agenda. So being in the position you're in, can you kind of give us an update? Do you see there is a lot of resistance mounting against this? Do you see encouraging signs in the trajectory or not?
Yes, I do. I think actually a lot of, even in the blue states, a lot of people who oversee pension plans recognize that ESG is a problem because it undermines the fiduciary standard that this country has upheld for so many years. The challenge is keeping that at the fore. And I think the more the truth is coming out on ESG, the more difficult it is to push that agenda. And so I do see signs that is happening. I've heard of legal people in those states reminding the boards they run on an ESG platform, and then they get them in the back and they say, "Look, you can't really do this, right?" And the more that people in the marketplace stand up and say, "We don't want your business politicized," we've got to have our voice heard. And this is one of the messages I give people, is that each of us as consumers need to tell businesses that we don't want them politicizing their business, and we applaud those who are not, and letting people know, businesses that are, saying, "Don't do that. Why are you politicizing your business? That doesn't help. Just focus on your business and providing the best good or service. That is your benefit to society, not telling me how virtuous you are."
Hi, I'm Ralph Lehman. I had a 25-year career at GE Asset Management as their chief investment officer and a trustee of the GE Pension Trust. I agree with everything you have in your pitch. I love it, except for maybe how you spelled Mao. But the one thing that I would like to do is add some context. And the context is that ESG, from my perspective, looking at sort of the origins back in the 90s, when I was trying to draw up investment risk, as a fiduciary, I completely agree you did a great job of describing the difference between ethical investing and being a fiduciary for all different views in your investment base, and various clients of various issues that they take personally or not. So you have to fiduciarily provide a great return for everyone, regardless of views, unless you have a specific client that asks for it, and you have to deliver that. When it comes to ESG, investment risk is key. And the idea is a good one. It's how to assess risk that's related to environment, social, and finally governance, which are hugely important. I looked at the G as a big deal as far as investment risk. Social, yes, you really don't want slave labor in a company that you're investing in because it's a bad business risk. It's not ethical, but it's really bad for an emerging market investor looking at growing the value curve and thinking about how a country, if their kids are not getting education, it's never going to be able to go up the value curve. So those all make sense. Environment, you don't want a big polluter that's dumping toxic waste into the river. That's not a sustainable business model. Sustainability, notice how I defined it. If you take it and you invoke what we learned last night from Alex, it's all about messaging. And messaging to me, I'm just going to propose it, is think about the E. It's been co-opted for C. It's carbon or climate, however you want to define it, okay? That's not the original intent here. It's been turned into a political weapon. My suggestion is look at E and look at it the way it should be looked at, that environmental risk. And if we go right at the targets here, and the target isn't necessarily the State Streets and the BlackRocks, because they're responding what their clients want. And they've got a lot of states not Utah, but others. And I come from Connecticut right now, and my future state is Utah. I have a house in Park City. I will be there in 4 years as a permanent resident. But the point is that those states are driving this because they were divesting from those big banks. And you go to, I know you've got to be active. You've got to be active in those state fund meetings where you get together and you share your peer reviews. And my view is to look at how you attack them on E, because on an E standpoint, everything that I heard over the last day and a half is that it's not environmentally friendly. And S and social, if you look at those lithium mines, that's not a good thing on the social side. So if you score it for ESG originally intended, I think you've got a winning case.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, and I think there's some very good points there about financial materiality, right? When you think about E, so S&P Global came out and rated the state of Utah with an ESG score, and they said drought. They identified drought as an issue, which I have no problem with if it's financially material. The issue that I have is if you take an ESG score and you put something financially material in an ESG score, you can put things that are not financially material in an ESG score and start manipulating the system. So I said, look, if there is something financially material in the environment or social, whatever it is, governance area, put it in the credit rating where it's always been, and don't create a separate score, because then the marketplace can say, well, yeah, Utah has the best credit rating in the world, but they shouldn't be given the lowest cost of capital because of their ESG rating. Now, let me give you an example of G. Now, this is under G. This is crazy. S&P Global has adverse publicity resulting in reputational risk. In August of last year at BYU, there was a women's volleyball game where a player on the opposing team said somebody is using racial slurs against me, and it's making me hard to play. Well, there was a huge investigation. It was never found to be true. But even if it were true, because of the headline that resulted from that, suddenly the entire state of Utah was a bunch of racists. And if we're out in the marketplace trying to raise capital and ESG has taken over the marketplace, we would have an adverse publicity resulting in reputational risk. Now, I will also tell you that there is no other state in the union that has more reputational risk than the state of Utah. We were started by a bunch of former polygamists, and we've had reputational risk ever since. And it has nothing to do with our ability to repay our debt. Thank you.
We have time just for a couple more. Go ahead.
Hal Metis, Durham, North Carolina. McKinsey Company is a big consultant company. They're pushing ESG like crazy. Are you doing, I mean, they need clients, and are you doing something to counter that?
Well, I think the way to counter that is to continue to point out the absurdity of ESG and the dangers of ESG. And frankly, this is the Chinese Communist Party loves this. I spoke in Logan, Utah, 1 year ago, and the keynote speaker was actually Lily Tang Williams, and that was her. Thank you. That was her presentation. And I spoke for 5 minutes on ESG. There were members of the Chinese Communist Party in attendance at that presentation, and they purportedly told people at their table that Lily is lying and ESG is great. Why? Because it undermines the United States, it undermines Western society, and it helps bolster China. So we need to know where it's coming from. Hopefully, as people understand that, they will say, you know what, maybe ESG isn't a great thing for us. And then the McKinseys can get out of it.
One last question here.
Good morning. I'm Tom Moriarty from Colorado. Clearly, this battle against ESG is being fought at the state level. How many states are needed to reach a critical mass where we can stop it?
Well, I think one of the problems is that these banks and other financial institutions need to understand is as they continue down this path, we are moving toward blue economy and red economy. I don't think banks want that But I don't know. That's really the calculus that these financial institutions are going to have to go through. But I am hopeful because last year during the proxy voting season, Bank of America and all the financial institutions actually voted against, like 80 to 90% of shareholders voted against ESG types of proposals for them. So that's got to continue. Thank you.
That was fantastic and encouraging. I don't hear a lot of ESG discussions that are encouraging at the end, I got to tell you. Right now, we are about to begin our 15-minute break between the plenary session and the panels. Two panels this morning starting at 9 a.m. It goes 90 minutes. Then there's a 50-minute break. Then, of course, as you already know, two other panels for another 90-minute break, and then we're back here for lunch. If you ever happen to see a discrepancy in your printed program with what is printed on the posters in front of the rooms, go with the posters, because we had to send these programs to the printer a little earlier than we wanted to. So thanks for being here this morning, and we'll see you again in this room for lunch.
For the cheesy